Hello, welcome to Cybersecurity Unlocked. If you are watching on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe. Please leave a comment. I'll be really keen to hear everybody's feedback. I am delighted to be joined by my good friend of 8 or 9 years, Pak Wai. He is currently the head of offensive security for Nordea. He is also a jiu-jitsu brother and just an all-round cool guy. How are we doing?
Thanks, Ethan. Yeah, I'm doing well. It's glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you. Yeah. Really good to see you. Always good to see you. Always good to catch up. So let's get into it. How did you get started in the world of cyber?
Yeah, so my first job was in the army. I joined the military in my early years when I was a younger man, much younger man, and I came through that route. Basically, I was trained in the army to be an intelligence operator. That was my role. And from there, I transitioned into my first taste of cyber, which was law enforcement. Back then, it was called the Serious Organized Crime Agency. It's now called the National Crime Agency.
Right. SOCA.
Serious Organized Crime Agency. Yeah. And I was in their cybercrime unit, or e-crime, as we called it back then. And so that was my first taste of cyber. So internet investigations was essentially what we were doing.
Yeah.
And from there, then transitioned into the world of cybersecurity for financial services, and I've been there ever since. That was back in 2012.
Okay,
right?
Before it was cool.
Yeah,
before it was cool to be in cyber.
Well, I mean, back then, Aves, I mean, it was very new. And there weren't a lot of us around who knew what we were doing. Quite honestly, we were kind of just making things up as we went along. Quite honestly, and. It's very different now. Obviously, there's a lot of talented people and folks who've studied it and have the requisite technical qualifications and skills. But back then, it was kind of the Wild West almost. Yeah. But I've worked for 5 banks now, right. and mostly in CTI roles, but some not. Yeah. I feel like I've a pretty good sort of view and grasp on it now. Yeah.
And what advice would you give somebody that is looking to maybe make that move into the private sector? I mean, I've always said that it's a really healthy part of the industry. It offers a career roadmap for people in the military, moving into the private sector and utilizing all of those skills that are required in the military. What advice would you give somebody that's looking to make that sort of transition?
Yeah, well, obviously, knowing people and having a network is important, right? It's because a lot of the times it's knowing what the opportunities are and getting your foot in the door. Of course, it's not a guarantee that you're going to get the job, but that does help. But the second thing is knowing that it's not the same, right? Like for anyone who thinks that just because they're an intel guy in the military or the police that they're just going to slot right into a corporate job. Yeah, it's a very different. It's a very different role. It's a very different job, right? Well, on one hand, you're protecting a bank. It's a corporate entity with a whole different set of priorities and goals. And on the other hand, you were, helping to catch criminals or, prosecuting operations in theatre, whatever, right? Very different jobs. Just knowing that, whilst you're bringing a lot to the table. And you are. There's no doubt about it. If you have that sort of training and discipline from those environments, then you'll be useful. But knowing that it's a very different role, and having the sort of humility to learn again. Yes. And really, you're going to be learning a lot when you make that jump.
And what do you tend to look for when because you're obviously an esteemed, leadership person now in the industry and manager. Yeah. What are the things that you sort of look for when you're interviewing people?
The main thing is fit. Quite honestly, when I'm looking to hire people, it's easy, right? Because like we put a vacancy out and we'll get a lot of CVs, and for the most part, they'll all have the requisite skills and qualifications, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be in front of us. Yeah. Right? Like we obviously don't look at the CVs where they don't have the requisite skills and experience. So when it comes to actually talking to them, it's more about fit. Yeah. Right? It's more about their attitude. Like, are they somebody who I think is going to work well in my team? Yeah. Do they look like do they have the right attitude? Right? Like, is it a proactive one? Right? Are they proactive? Are they keen? Do they articulate themselves well? Do they communicate well? Yeah. Those are the things that I'm looking for not above all, but they're important, right? And then of course we get into their skills and their experience, and so I would rank it like that, really.
Yeah. So what sort of the soft skills that they have in terms of how they respond. So how they respond and how they sort of articulate themselves to maybe people above you, sort of.
Exactly. Yeah. As I keep saying to them, like I get that you're smart, right?
Yeah.
Of course you're smart, but then there's loads of smart people around here.
Yeah.
But that's not useful if you can't articulate what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? If you've just spent the last 2 hours, crunching a load of data and doing some really deep and meaningful analysis, great. But you've got to be able to articulate the value of that to somebody.
Yes.
And that somebody is going to be hopefully somebody who understands it, like hopefully me or somebody else in the team. But we can bridge that gap, right? So I get that senior managers aren't going to understand what you're doing, but if you need to be able to at least explain it to me, so then I can bang the drum for you. You know what I mean, and that's kind of what I see is part of one aspect of what I do is to really amplify and be the voice for the guys who are doing the good work.
Now I remember when I think 2013, 2014, it felt like the cyber market just was going crazy for cyber threat intelligence. Everybody was hiring threat intelligence. It was almost kind of like the buzzword in the industry, particularly around financial services. And I don't think it was something around sort of regulatory requirements that were driving that.
Right.
But it was like you couldn't move for cyber threat intelligence roles. It seems to be very different now. And I was keen to get your insight on why you think that might be.
Yeah.
Is it regarded as a bit of a luxury item when the CISO is kind of, going through the aisles and the proverbial kind of, adding SOC, and then is threat intel kind of a luxury?
Right. Yeah.
What's your sort of take on what's happened to the CTI market?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And we were talking about it just now, weren't we? I think that cyber threat intelligence, as you say, it used to be, and to some extent still is, this thing that I think CISOs and senior execs want to have, right? Because they hear about it. It has the word intelligence there. That's kind of sexy. And they think, we should have that. So that, stand up a team, let's go. But I think what's happened is that, so a lot of banks, and banks were kind of leading the charge on this, weren't they? Yeah, back in the early teens and whatnot. So a lot of banks stood up those teams. And then, a lot of guys like me got hired, great. And a lot of talented analysts got hired, and we started working, right? Collecting, processing, analyzing, disseminating. But of course, the first step in the intelligence cycle is direction. Yeah. That's the first step. Before you do anything else, you need direction. Yeah. Right. And that's kind of where we fell down, right? Like, what is the direction here? And that needs to come from the top, or at least it needs to come from stakeholders within the bank who understand not just what intelligence is, but how we can use it. And the organization has to be mature enough to leverage threat intelligence. Yeah. Right. We could be collecting what we think is good quality intel for tactical, strategic, operational use, but is the organization mature enough to actually use it? Yeah. And in my experience, and in the experience of others who I've spoken to at my level, unfortunately, a lot of organizations aren't mature enough to use this stuff. But they still want it. So to answer your question, is it a nice to have? In a lot of organizations, I think it is. It's just that, they have a SOC, right? They have a CDC, they've got incident response, they've got attack monitoring. Oh, we need a CTI team as well. But are we mature enough to use it? I don't know if they've asked themselves honestly those questions. Yeah. So now we find ourselves in a situation now where we've got a lot of teams out there, and again, this isn't a reflection on the men and women who are staffing those teams. They're dedicated, serious professionals. But is the organization that they're working for mature enough to actually use the intel that they're providing? Yeah, that's the question, and that's kind of where I think we are with that. Yeah.
And what do you think that could change that then? Is it just a case of as they become more sort of mature? Because obviously, as you mentioned, there's sort of the early teens where cybersecurity all of a sudden became like a really hot market. And now the industry is starting to catch up, and the industry is full of like a lot of industry experts. What do you think is going to change? Anything around like emerging tech or like AI? Is that going to maybe bring the market back somewhat?
Yeah, I mean, the AI thing, I've got one inkling on, or at least I read something about that. But to answer the first bit, like I mean, look, organizations obviously are all on some stage of the journey of maturing their cyber security capability, right? At the end of the day, it's about how cyber resilient are you? So how good are you at detecting and recovering from cyber attacks? And we're all on that journey, right?
Yeah.
A mature organization is going to be able to use, if they have the right link ups and the right buy-in, is going to be able to leverage threat intelligence.
Yeah.
It's about education, of course. It's about maturing the organization. It's about investing in the right technologies and the right people, and having internal processes to, so that there's the right handoffs, all of that good stuff. But does that mean that CTI is suddenly going to get back to those days of the teens where it's really hot again? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, there is a case to be made for it, of course. I mean, yeah, like we all at rock bottom, there's this problem where we've got finite resources and there's infinite things that we could do. Right, that's the problem that most organizations have. Right, so there's cyber threats and all sorts of problems and issues that we need to think about, worry about, and to some degree solve. But of course, we've got to prioritize our work because we've got finite resources: people, process, technology. Right? Yeah. So intelligence should help that. Yeah. Right? You want to be intelligence led. So the theory is correct. Like we should be intelligence led. Right. We should act off good information. Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely a role for it. Again, it's just how mature is the organization. When it comes to AI, man, I mean, I don't have any insights on that. And I heard a podcast, not one as illustrious as this one, Adrian, but I heard a podcast where they were talking about what could AI mean for cyber attacks. I've not heard anything specific about that, but in the near term, this is a scary thought for you, right? So you've got ChatGPT now, right? Now, maybe not this iteration, but certainly the next one or the one after that. Yeah, you're going to be at a stage where anybody, you, me, anybody in the world could just use ChatGPT and say, look, write me 20 academic journals that talks about the risk of, and then insert, whatever new vulnerability or cyber threat just happens to be on your mind, right? So write me 20 academic journals that talk about the risk of, I don't know, this particular vulnerability, right? Or this particular piece of technology. And suddenly you're flooding the internet with made up academic journals. As the technology gets better, maybe it's YouTube videos, it's podcasts, it's audio, it's visual, whatever, right? Yeah. So suddenly, my boss tasks me to look at a certain issue, right? Be that a new piece of technology or a new vulnerability, and I'm looking it up, and all the stuff that I'm referencing is made up. Yeah, right. It's been generated by artificial intelligence. It's not from people, experts who have looked into this. It's just literally made up by some geezer on his computer. Just right. So So that's worrying, right? That is. So really worrying, now you're, because obviously, I mean, a lot of what we do relies on information that we're finding and that we're pulling off the internet. Yeah. That is I mean, people will talk about, I've got this source and that source, and I'm using this vendor, but we're all using the internet, right? Yeah, we're all using information that we're getting from the internet. Yeah. If you can't trust that information, we're all pretty screwed. Yeah. Exactly, and that's a concern of mine.
Yeah. I've often had that same worry about deepfake and how the emergence of deepfake and how advanced that is now. What's going to be the next version, 4 years down the line from that deepfake? Like literally you're not going to be able to sort of trust anything. Yeah. Like what?
Yeah. That's a scary thought, isn't it? Like, really there's now videos of maybe, I don't know, Vladimir Putin saying he's going to press the button. Yeah, and it's a complete deepfake, right? Yeah. Or another video of Kim Jong-un saying, he's about to start launching missiles or something, and it's all fake. Yeah. But it obviously then prompts responses from whoever, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of worrying.
It is, and this is probably like $1 million question. You might not be able to answer, but what can we do about it? How can we sort of validate and what is going to, and is that going to maybe create opportunity? Because there is a lot of negative publicity about AI generally. Yeah. In terms of it's everybody's moving to automation, people are going to be losing their jobs, and it's you hear that sort of polarized narrative from Western media. But what do you think
I mean, to combat or to manage that particular issue that we just talked about, I mean, it would be good, wouldn't there, if there was some sort of, but this takes, like cooperation across the internet, which we know is notoriously hard. It'd be nice if there was some sort of central source of truth of media, right? That, stuff that has been released by people, that has been verified by people, that we all can agree is content that has been at least generated by people, and not by AI. Be that text, video, audio, pictures, whatever. I know that there is, and then maybe AI would have a role to play in that, right? Because if AI can generate the content, perhaps AI can spot if the content has been generated by another AI. Right. So maybe we could use AI to fix that solution, to solve that problem. But I mean, as far as what we do going forward with AI, that's beyond my sort of visibility and expertise. I'm not worried about it except for the thing that we've just talked about. I'm not one of these people who worries about AI taking loads of jobs. And
no,
I mean, if it does, then well, I mean, it'll be I guess jobs like mine that'll go first. I mean, maybe I do need to worry about it, but I don't think about it in the
no.
term.
Well, I think we're in a very kind of big shift that's happening at the moment. I think whenever there is a big shift, what comes with that as well is opportunity as well. So it's just going to be about what is the next opportunity. What's been the biggest sort of threat that you might not be able to share this, but maybe from years ago? But what's been the biggest threat you've faced, and how did you deal with it?
Threat, you mean as in a cyber one that we?
Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, talking to some of our colleagues that who've worked in a bunch of banks, what is clear is that the big banks out there don't get a lot of actual major incidents.
Right.
And it's hard to know why that is, right? Is it happening and we don't see it, or is it not happening? We think some combination of the two, but so put it this way, that the big banks, the ones that you can name, have big cybersecurity budgets, lots of people, process and technology to stop cyber attacks. So what I'm saying is there's lots of targets that are much lower hanging fruit than us. Right. And we can all name, several examples of either smaller banks or banks in countries they tend to be, they tend to score high on the corruption index, where banks get pwned a lot.
Right. Okay. That's interesting.
The big ones out there, the ones that, that you represent, the ones that I've worked for, on the whole, don't have a lot of major incidents. So I can't think of major ones. Now, that said, there's a couple of banks I worked for that had large scale DDoS attacks.
Right.
And in one case, a third party supply chain attack. That's a big one, right? Because banks like the big ones have a lot of third parties. Right? And those third party suppliers, they may not have, they're lower hanging fruit, or they may not have the best information security or cybersecurity protocols. So I worked for one bank where one of their providers had been well and truly compromised, and we were getting on calls with them, talking to their information security teams, trying to understand what was happening, and it turns out that they had been compromised by what we think was one of these APT groups. Right. And then it was just a case of understanding what the exposure for us as the client bank was. Right. So stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, and to your point that banks don't get that many kind of incidents anymore, I guess that's proof in the pudding that, it really does work, and, it is worth that investment.
Yeah.
And hopefully other industries will kind of follow suit and catch up.
Yes. I mean, I don't want to pull at this thread too much, because I might be talking myself out of a job, but I mean,
you'd never do that.
The fact is, the big banks, the big organizations who've staffed these things up, tend not to have major incidents. But then, is it happening and we're not seeing it? There's always that.
Yeah.
Right. Because, these attackers, they're smart and they're clever, and we're keeping a lid on things, I feel. Right. So we might not be seeing it.
Well, I guess they're evolving as well, aren't they? Their techniques are kind of evolving, advancing as well. And that's what it is. I think it's always important to have a really strong threat intel capability that can kind of monitor and track that. As soon as you kind of take your eye off the ball, then that's where you could potentially become vulnerable.
Agreed.
Yeah. And I guess, with the big banks, they're held to a certain kind of regulatory standard.
That's right, yeah.
And maybe other industries aren't so much, but maybe that will change particularly with things like management of data, management of customer information.
Mm-hmm. Well, the regulatory piece is huge. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say, I couldn't put a number on it, but the vast majority of the work that big banks do is regulatory, is because it's been deemed necessary by a regulator. It's not because we the men and women who are staffed to do the cybersecurity have thought, we should be doing this, right? These sets of initiatives, this work, these project deliverables, we think that's important for the bank. There is that, but a lot of it is driven by the regulators. We're a heavily regulated sector.
No, that's good. It's good. All right, and now after such an illustrious career.
It's not
there's plenty of life left in you. I know that. What is next for you? What other sort of career aspirations do you have?
I want to keep. I want to keep learning. I don't want to stay in one sort of area for too long. What I mean is, I just want to be learning new stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse, because you see this a lot. People who've been in the same place, in the same role for decades, and they just become part of the furniture, don't they? And they stop caring about making things better or really changing anything. Their job is just to maintain the status quo.
Yeah.
And in a large organization, unfortunately, you just get a lot of bureaucracy, don't you? And you get people who become part of that.
Yeah.
Right? They're not trying to fix anything. They're just part of
survival.
Waiting to retire.
Yeah.
They just wait to retire. And so, what's next for me? I don't know, man. Like...
CSU? That'd be on the...
maybe.
4 or 5 years' time?
Or
at the helm?
I think I've... I think I'm ready for a role like that, sort of, in the short to medium term.
Yeah.
But like anything in cyber is interesting.
Yeah.
Right? Cyber is interesting. And it's hot. It's still a hot subject, right? Like it's still an area where in most organizations, that's the department that's getting most of the change budget.
Yes.
Right. That budget's limited, but a large chunk of it gets reserved for cyber.
Yeah.
Consistently, because people are waking up to the fact that they need this stuff.
They need it. Yeah. And here's the other interesting thing I've noticed about that as well, particularly in the US as well. I mean, obviously the CISO really kind of has a sort of a seat at the table now for board, which is that new regulation was passed sort of last year. But I've noticed a trend of people with a cybersecurity background or an ex-CISO moving into roles such as a CTO or a COO. Because really once you get to sort of CISO status, it's really about leadership and mentoring and leading a team and setting the direction. Facing off to board, explaining technical problems, business needs. So that again, I think is a really sort of healthy industry, particularly for a company that is going to jump into sort of hyper growth. They can have somebody with a security lens actually building and growing the technology stack. Again, there's I think the opportunities are endless.
Yeah. No, I mean that would be nice, right? It'd be nice if the person who was basically setting strategy and building things had that background.
Yeah.
Right? Like, C-level people. The problem often is that they can't start from scratch.
Yeah.
They're going to come into that role and they're going to inherit all the legacy stuff.
Yeah.
Which is just full of, very, very old, these are legacy problems that have been around probably for 10, 20, however many years, right? Yeah. So they're not going to be able to start again. They can't start from scratch. They're going to come in, inherit all this stuff and try and manage it. It would be interesting it would be interesting to see how you would do it from the ground up. That's why, if you ever come across a role where they're building stuff from literally the ground up, that would be super interesting, mate. Yeah. Because, I think that, certainly there's enough people with enough know-how to know how to build an organization securely.
Yeah.
Right. The problem is, all these organizations that we're working for, and they're a hodgepodge of organizations, right? Yeah. It's acquisitions and whatnot, mergers. It's just a collection of organizations, and there's so many legacy issues, and it's just hard to manage.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming down. And the threat intel topic is something that I haven't been able to sort of cover yet. So you're my first port of call. Obviously, really keen to get your insight on it. So thanks so much for sharing your journey, and best of luck for the future.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks everybody for listening. As I said, please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment, and I'll see you on the next one.